Hello students, I hope you guys are doing well. So this week we're going to be actually starting with the topic of proportions. Okay, so today is going to be our first lesson. That means that if you don't have your math notebook, please go ahead and get your math notebook and turn to the table of contents. We are going to be looking at Unit 2, Lesson Number 1, Intro to Constant of Proportions with Tables. Okay, so today's date is either going to be September the 1st or 2nd. It really depends where you are, which day you're listening to this lesson, but regardless. Okay, so now let's look at what is it that we're going to be learning. So if you please go ahead and look at the objective on the top. It says the objective is, in today's lesson we are going to be learning about the proportions. Sorry, it should be just about proportions and how they are similar or different from scale factors. So by the end of this lesson you should be able to explain is what is it that we're learning today or right now that is different or similar from what we learned before, which was scaling. So just as a review, right, we said scaling, the conclusion that we came up with is scaling is kind of like multiplication, right? But it's a little bit unique that from an elementary school you just multiplied to get a number that was larger up to like 3rd grade, right? But scaling is actually a multiplication by either a number that's a whole or more than a whole to get something that is bigger than the original number, or a number that is smaller than a whole to get something that's smaller than the original number, right? In either case you're just multiplying. So how is it that we're going to take this skill and think about proportions? So let's go ahead and get started. But before we get started, please keep in mind that following this, you're going to have activities on Khan Academy, right? There are 3 activities that you should complete. Hopefully we have a better, we make a better attempt with completing our Khan Academy activities than we were able to do last week. And there's also a question on Google Classroom that you're responsible for answering. So those are 3 activities and 1 question. So in total, 4 different things that you have to do besides watching this video. So again, let's go back to the lesson and think about what we're doing. Again, we're going to learn about proportions and think about how is it similar or different from what we learned in scale factors. So let's get started. So here we have a problem. Okay, in this problem, they simply state the following. So they say that 4 quarters are equal in value to 4 dimes. Well, that is a fact. 4 quarters equals $1. So 25 cents, 25 cents, 25 cents, 25 cents equals to 10 dimes, which is 10 dimes equals to $1. So here we have number of quarters. Okay. So, and on the other side, there are 2 quantities. If you notice the comparison, you're comparing the number of quarters with the number of dimes. So we're going to go ahead and create a table so that we can keep our information organized. Okay, so why did we do this? Like, I mean, maybe I should not even have done that and we should have first looked at what the question is, but regardless, let's go ahead and get started. So the actual question is, remember, this is just the information. They're simply stating a fact. And the fact here is that 4 quarters are equal in value to 10 dimes. There's something that they're telling us. They're giving us a relationship. Okay, they're giving a relationship that makes something true or equal to each other. Okay, it's a ratio that makes 2 things equal to each other. So then the next question is, how many dimes equal to the value of 6 quarters? Well, some of you guys might be able to do this in your head. And if you're not, then let's think about what it means to have a proportion. So here, we want to know how many dimes equal to the value of 6 quarters. So again, dimes is the 1 quantity that we had above, and then we're looking at quarters again. So one more time, if you look at it, this problem is a comparison of dimes and quarters. Those are the 2 quantities. Okay, number of quarters and the number of dimes. So let's go ahead and think about this. So if you notice, this is actually similar to the last lesson that we did when we were looking at unit scale factors. So we need to find out something first. how many dimes equal to the value of 6 quarters. So the output here, whatever is it that we want to find out, is going to be our output. Okay, so here we go. That's my output because it says how many dimes. The question is about the number of dimes. Equals to what? The number of quarters. So how many dimes out of 6 quarters? So whatever that's given to you, that's called the input. Okay, whatever the question is about, that's the output. Whatever is given to you, that's the input. Okay, so if I go back to my table, I know that I have 6 quarters. Okay, and for those 6 quarters, I want to find out how many dimes I would have, or equal to that. So, well, how would I find it out? I would need an equivalent ratio. So if I look up here, I actually do have an equivalent ratio, and that says that 4 quarters equals 10 dimes. So how can I use this information to find out this information? So let's go ahead and find out what makes them equivalent ratios. So here, output, remember, if you ever want to find out a ratio or proportion, you first need to take its ratio, right? And here the ratio that we're going to take is going to be of dimes to quarters. Why dimes? Because remember, dime is our input. Whatever it is that you want to find out, that has to be your numerator, and whatever you're given is your input, right? So in this case, what we want to find is how many. So it's going to be how many out of what you're given, which is how many dimes out of how many quarters. So what do I have? So here I have 10 dimes out of 4 quarters. So if you actually simplify that, right, so it's actually going to get simplified by 2 over 2, because both 10 and 2 divide by 10 and 4 divide by 2. So that's going to give me 5 halves, or if you actually take a calculator and just do 5 divided by 2, you're going to get 2.5. So that means that if I have 6 quarters, I would actually have to take this number and multiply it by 2.5. 2.5. Every time I have the number of quarters and I want to get dimes, I would have to do 2.5. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that, remember, this proportion is a unit scale. A proportion equals a unit scale. It's a special type of a scale factor. So what that means, that if I had 1 quarter, for every 1 quarter, I would have 2.5 dimes. Okay, that kind of doesn't make sense because you can't have 2.5 dimes, but if you think about it, what it means is 2 dimes and 5 pennies. Okay, 2.5 means 2 dimes and 5 pennies. Okay, so now let's look at it. So that gives us the relationship between quarters and dimes. But now what if, I hope it makes you think about it, but what if I was given 15 dimes and I was asked to find out the number of quarters? If I was given 15 dimes and I said, now go back and do the opposite, but I just realized that we actually never answered the original question. So if I take 6 quarters and multiply it by 2.5, I would actually get 15 here. Okay, so I'm going to, since we already did 15, let's go ahead and now look at what if I had 22 dimes. If I had 22 dimes, then now I decide that, no, you know what, I just want to go back to the store and get the quarters. That's too many dimes. Let me see if I can get quarters. Well, how would you do it? What scale factor, or what proportion, what unit scale, what proportion would you multiply by to get the number of quarters? And this is where it becomes interesting. Okay, or I hope you see the connection. Now you want to go back in the opposite direction, right? So now the thing that you want to find out is the number of quarters. So now your output is going to become what? The quarters, right? In the second problem. So we just did the first problem, now we're doing the second problem, and the thing that you're given, right, is going to be the number of dimes. Now we're going in the opposite direction. Quarters and dimes. So here, if you go back in the beginning, they already gave us a relationship. So we had 4 quarters for every 10 dimes. That was a constant ratio. That means that is always going to be true. That's always a fact. And if you actually use a calculator, or if you can do this base 10 in your head, 4 divided by 10, that's going to be 0.4. Okay, so the reciprocal of 2.5, right? So I hope you guys see that connection. The reciprocal of 2.5 is 0.4. Or let's go ahead and break this down a little bit even further. 10 over 4 simplified, let me put this in a different color. 10 over 4 simplified to 5 halves. And if you divide it into a decimal, you get 2.5. But if you actually do 4/10, which will equal to 2/5, remember, these two are now your reciprocals. The answer to that is going to be 0.4. Okay. So what would I do if I want to go back to find the answer? Remember, now I'm going from, you have from a larger number to a smaller number, so I need to multiply with a number that's less than a whole, so I'll multiply it by 0.4. And you can use your calculator, you can use a Google calculator, whatever works for you. And if we do 22 times 0.4, right, and let's go ahead and take out a calculator. So we do 22 times 0.4, that is going to equal 8.8 quarters, right? So you will get 8 quarters, and then you're gonna have to keep some dimes. Okay, so that's $2, so you're gonna have to keep about 2 dimes for yourselves, right? Every 4 quarters you get $1, so 4 and 4, that's 8 quarters, that's $2. And here you're gonna have to save the 2 dimes. Okay, so that's a little bit of an introduction. So the question again is, how is this similar to what we have learned? So I hope you pause the video, and here's the key point, and you try to fill it out by yourself. Remember, you can, I'm going to go over it, so just fill it out, see what you put in there, and then play the video again and see how you did. Try one of them at a time if you can do all 2 of them, or all of them at the same time. So the question is, the constant of proportionality is the blank that multiplies each blank to a blank. So constant of proportionality is simply the proportion, right? It is the unit rate that multiplies each input to give an output. Okay, again, one more time, it is the unit rate. Let's go back here. When we divided 10 divided by 4, we got 2.5. What does that 2.5 mean? That 2.5 means that because we were first trying to find out the number of dimes, right? That's why we divided it like that. Since we were finding the number of dimes, we divided what we want, which is the number of dimes, with the number of quarters. We got 10 divided by 4, or 2.5. That means for every 1/4 you get 2.5 dimes. Is the unit scale factor, or the unit rate that you use to multiply what you're given to get what you want. All right, now what about number 2? A blank is the given quantity. Think about what we have learned. Okay, it should make the entire blank true. A blank is the given quantity. You have two options. You have either input or the output. Which one is the given? Okay, so in this case that will be the input, and the blank is the quantity that is missing or that you want. So that will be the output. So hopefully you're making some connections, and see which words keep coming up. Output, output, input, input, and these words are going to keep coming up in this unit. Something that you have, you multiply it by unit rate to get something that you want, if it's a constant relationship. Okay, so now let's go ahead and see what the criteria for success. The criteria for success is every time you deal with proportions, you're going to think about this. So what's the first thing that you do when you're dealing with a proportional relationship? Is that you create a table, and then you label your two quantities. Remember, so here's my two quantities for quarters and dimes. So you're going to label your two quantities, and then you have to label which one is input and which one is output. And where did we do that? We did that right here. We did that right here, right? We labeled which one is input and which one is output based on the problem that you have. Okay, then you find your unit rate, or the constant of proportionality, right? In this case, it was for every 1/4 you have 2.5 dimes. That was my unit rate in this case. And then you want to go back and check your work. How would I check my work in this case? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward. If you actually get the right answer, you can simply go back and check your work. So let's go ahead and take out our calculator again. So if I got it correct, remember they gave me a relationship right here. Okay, they gave me a relationship right here. So let's see what happens if I take 4 and multiply it by 2.5. What should I get? Okay, if I take 4, multiply it by 2.5, I should get 10, and I do get 10. So that means that my constant of proportionality was actually correct, and it does make sense. Okay, so one more time, the relationship between scale factors. So let's go back. Oops. Sorry about that. So the relationship between scale factors and unit rate is that, the relationship between scale factors and proportions is that you're taking something and multiplying it to get something either bigger or smaller. Well, okay. And now, please keep in mind that I just totally messed this one up because I moved my drawing by accident. But please make sure that you guys, after you finish this, you practice the problems on page number 11. Please follow the instructions and see how you do it, or how well you do it. Please make sure that you follow the criteria for success, which is right here, and have a right plan to work with the problem. And then please go on Google Classroom and check your answer. Okay, so the answers are going to be on Google Classroom. All right. Hopefully, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or G-chat me. Looking forward to seeing you guys on Thursday.